Nothing left from it, over and down the better.
Okay, Birkenau is rather big, as you can see. We have the women's barracks over that way that we can see. Those are the original barracks of Birkenau. And unbelievably, but the area over there where you see the trees was one time, as I told you before, 50% of Oshvientzim was Jewish. So one of that piece of land was Jewish land as well. And you never guess what they did with it. They used to train pioneers to go to Kibbutzim in Israel. Over here. Look what happens to this place. We have over here, okay, as I said, the women's camp. Again, camps one after the other, different fields that you can see here. You can see the pylons here. Crematoria number 2 and number 3 are up towards those trees that way. 4 and 5 are that way. Over there, Canada is that way. Mexico is that way. Okay, and we'll talk all about these places afterwards. It was a huge, huge camp. 2 fields away from here, there was a different camp. And it was one of 2 types in Birkenau. And it was known as the family camp. There were only 2 places that there were family camps. One was the Theresian camp, which is before Hungarian Jewry came here. Okay, was the Theresian camp. And the other one was the Gypsy camp up by number 2, crematoria number 2. Where men, women and children were able to stay together. Now men, women and children, okay, in the Theresian camp, you know, when you go to Theresian, those of you that have been there, I know there's a few of you that have been to Theresian. If you go to Prague, you should definitely extend for a day to go to see Theresian. When you go to Theresian, you walk in there and you think, oh, okay, it's a walk in the park compared to Poland. And the truth is, it was a walk in the park compared to Poland for them. But it was still terrible, horrific what took place in that ghetto. The ghetto, which was meant to be a show ghetto, a ghetto of the elderly, that's what it was meant to be. One day, humanitarian organisation from Geneva decided that they're going to go and visit one of these places. And you know, I was in the Israeli army. When you want to catch a terrorist in the Israeli army, you know that they're not going to turn up to the different border posts which are going into the other parts of Israel. It's not going to happen. So what do? You set up surprise little different patrol posts. Surprise on the road, boom, because you've got information they're going to come that way. And that's when you catch them. They're not going to come to the regular place. You catch them there. The Red Cross decided to send a letter 3 weeks ahead of time to Theresian to say, oh, we're coming round. Oh, okay, fine. And we're going to be there from such and such a time to such and such a time. No problem. So they send the letter to them. Okay, they get it. During this time, the Germans destroy the internal part of the ghetto. They plant flowers there. They make sure the whole place looks beautiful. They give it a touch of paint. It looks great. It reminds you, if any of you were in Russia before the wall came down. I was in Russia before the wall came down. Okay. So it reminds you of the KGB tour of Russia. Okay. You couldn't drive on any roads. You had to go on their road from the airport. Only when you managed to get rid of your tail were you able then to see the real Russia. A bit like China today, by the way, in different parts. If you've been to China. Okay. Even though it's much easier today to go to all different places, but if you take one of their official guides, forget it. You're not going to see the whole of China. And so they arrive there, they get wined and they get dined. They have to put on a football match for them in the Magdeburg barracks. They have to put on a concert for them. And then the SS say to the Red Cross, I hope you're impressed. And they said, yes, we can see you're looking after the people. And therefore we have one request from you, and that is tell us where these Jews are in 6 months' time. We'll connect you, we'll contact you in 6 months' time. Let us know where they are. No problem. They leave. The SS ship the people out to Auschwitz, but they leave them in the family camp. Why? Because in Theresian, they've also been in areas where men, women and children can live together. They chose not to have children with them. They chose, a man called Freddie Hirsch decided that the kids should be left out of the horrors of the adults, and that he should be able to have their own life. And so here as well, even though the men, women and children could live together in the same barracks, the children live separately. Under the same guy, Freddie Hirsch, who was in charge of the education in Theresian, he's now here. One day, Varba, the man who I spoke about in Auschwitz number 1, comes up to Freddie Hirsch and says, listen, we've got information from the underground, who's here in Birkenau. That in 6 months' time, they're not going to let you just walk out of here. And they're going to take you up to the gas chamber. And therefore, says the underground in Auschwitz, if you rebel, we will rebel with you. Varba says, how do you know this is the case? I've got all these kids. What happens if we rebel and they shoot us all dead when we weren't meant to be shot dead? He says, I need some time to think about it. Father says no problem. He goes back into his bags, he takes out a cyanide pill that he's managed to smuggle in, he commits suicide. Freddie Hirsch. He doesn't want to take the decision. Come 6 months and a couple of days, somebody in Geneva still hasn't bothered to pick up the phone. And therefore the SS said, well, if you don't care about them, nor do we. And they take him up to the gas chamber. Those people who were here in Auschwitz during that time will never forget the night the Theresian camp was taken up. Because they kicked and they punched and they screamed as they were taken up to crematory number 4. And when they got to crematory number 4, they were pushed into the gas chambers, and one of the Sonderkommanders there was a Czech guy. His name was Flip Muller, and we have to this day his testimony. Flip Muller writes in his testimony, I went into the gas chambers because I saw my fellow countrymen going in there. They were singing the Czech national anthem, and then they sang the Hatikva. And if you think people went like sheep to the slaughter, it didn't happen. People didn't go like sheep to the slaughter. And they were pushed into the gas chamber, and he went in there and they kicked him out. They said, you've got to go and tell the world, you've got to survive. And the women kicked him out of the gas chamber, that he should survive. But now you understand why David Ben-Gurion came along when he coined the term of Shmum, UN nobody. Because it's quite surprising that we live in a generation to this very day where, you know what? It's amazing. You get bored, yalla, we'll hit Israel with another thing. We are the worst country in the world when it comes to human rights. It's impossible to hit. I just don't understand where that comes from. How is that possible that you can pass over 200 laws against Israel every year? That we're the worst country in the world with human rights? It's absolutely crazy. It's crazy. There are wars that have been taking place all over Africa. People are being slaughtered and people are being burnt and whatever else. But no, they're fine. And everything that's taking place in our countries, it's okay. And then you come to another guy who's sat in Gaza for over 5 years now, a man called Gilad Shalit, who the Red Cross haven't even gone to visit. It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. If you were persistent, you would be able to get there. But they're not. We have no one else to trust, no one else to rely on but our Father in heaven. And the more we try and put our faith in Ummot Olam, the more, unfortunately, we're going to falter. Time to learn the lessons of what took place here and what took place in other places around the world, and still to this day. We're going to go out and we're going to head to